Thank you for joining us. My name is Jon Ekstrom, and this is Vital for Colorado Radio. We join you twice a month to talk about issues pertinent to energy, development, and other issues of importance here in the state. I'm joined, as always, by our chairman and CEO, Peter Moore.
John, how are you doing today?
Never better, Peter. How are you?
Well, I'm very happy. It's a high point of my month to do this radio show, and John's a co-host, but he's also the fellow who produces and lines up the guests and does all the writing and a lot of stuff. So thank you, John, for this. And it's a real high point of my month.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure. And one of the things I like most about it is that we get to connect with interesting people all throughout the state. And that includes today's guest, if you would do the honor of introducing.
We are talking to Sean Holveck, who has several positions. His primary position, I think, for the purposes of this show, is that he's the co-director of the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance.
The former co-executive director.
The former co-executive director.
That's correct.
I've lost the nuances of all the titles that are out there in the world. But we also know him because he's on the steering committee of Vital for Colorado, Colorado Springs, which is one of the local energy organizations that's associated with Vital for Colorado. And my role is I'm president and CEO of Vital for Colorado. So it's a real treat to get to know you, Sean.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Well, Sean, it's a real pleasure to be here with you. And if you would do us a favor, you are active in a lot of different types of things. And the theme for this week has been outdoor recreation. And I know that's a driving force behind what you do professionally. It's also sort of a personal driving philosophy. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and some of the things that you're involved in?
Well, I can tell you a whole life story, but I'll keep it brief and tell you that as far as the outdoor recreation industry is concerned, I am a freelance writer that I do some reporting on some of the happenings in the outdoor recreation industry. I also do some product reviews, and of course, I'm personally involved in the outdoor industry just through activity. I'm a rock climber, a rock climbing guide, as a matter of fact, in the past, and I run a lot. I enjoy all of the trails in Colorado and actually all over our American West. And I certainly love to backpack and just go hiking, you name it. I pretty much have done it. I'm a kayaker, rafter, cyclist. I ride mountain bikes and cycle, so the only thing I really don't do on a regular basis, much to the chagrin of David Lineweber, who is the director or one of the directors, he's president of the board of Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance, is I don't fish a lot. So I can't say I don't do it at all, but I just don't do it on a regular basis. I'll stand by the stream and watch other fishermen, but yeah, it's just not my forte. I guess I don't have the patience for it.
Well, you know what? It sounds like there's a commercial out there. I think it's for Subaru, where you see two guys out there, and they get done doing whatever they're doing. I think it's mountain biking, and they spin like a wheel, and it says rock climbing, and they climb in the Subaru and go do that. That sounds like an ad that could be modeled after your very life.
There also is an old joke about fish and bicycles, and I think they don't mix very much.
Probably not.
So, Sean, are you a Colorado native, or can you tell us what brought you to Colorado?
You know, I am not a Colorado native. I've been in Colorado for about 12 years, and I grew up and have lived sort of in quite a few different places. I was born in Texas. I grew up in California. I actually went to high school in Oklahoma and college at the University of Oklahoma. But what brought me to Colorado was when I was 15, actually, my Boy Scout troop decided to go on their summer camp trip to Camp Alexander. They're in Lake George in 11 Mile Canyon. And so we went for a week, and at the end of that week, I actually applied to be on staff for the next year. All my friends thought I was crazy, and I was like, what do you mean I'm crazy? I'm going to go spend my summers in Colorado where it's beautiful. It's not hotter than you know what, and I actually get to have fun and be away from my parents and play outside and do all sorts of things. So from there, when I was 16, I was a rock climbing instructor. From there, I actually went on to become a backpacking guide and wilderness adventure guide, and then took over the camp when I was 21 and ran camp for about 7 years, and just had a blast doing that. I always say my first interview and the reason that I moved to Colorado was actually because the camp director at the time asked me if I would come and be a full-time employee for the Pikes Peak Council, and I was in my bathing suit in the camp office. So I looked at her and I said, "Absolutely. You mean you want to pay me to do this full time, to play outside, work with kids, and run camp, and you're going to pay me to do that, and all sorts of things?" So I packed up all my stuff from Oklahoma gladly, and I moved to Colorado Springs and haven't looked back.
That reminds me of sometimes we reference movies here on this, Peter, and I don't know if you remember this one, but it sounds like when in Wayne's World, when Rob Lowe shows up with checks for Wayne and Garth, and Wayne says, "Excuse me," it sounded like you were just going to pay me for doing Wayne's World. That sounds exactly like what happened to you, Sean.
It's very, very typical.
Exactly.
I bring up like the third man, and John brings up Wayne's World.
Perhaps a generational thing. We could start talking W.C. Fields if you like.
Sean, no. By the way, there's something that John doesn't know, and I guess you don't know because I've not mentioned to you, but I was on the board of directors of Geneva Glen Camp, which is the oldest camp in Colorado. It goes back to 1922, about 600 acres by Indian Hills. My daughter's actually today camp counselor at Geneva Glen right now, and I had lunch yesterday at Geneva Glen. I went up. It was supposed to be Taco Tuesday, but they had tacos on Wednesday, I think, in somewhat in honor of me. So I have a strong connection to children's camps, and I love Geneva Glen, about 1,000 kids during the summer, and it's nice to hear you have such a strong camp background. That's a great background to have, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Many people, there's just a certain personality and a certain experience that you get from being at camp. Actually, one of my favorite books by Michael Eisner, one of the top executives at Walt Disney, wrote a book called Camp. If you read that, you sort of get that idea of exactly what it's like. It's sort of like, I always say camp is like being the closest thing to being in the military, except for I'd say less blood, but sometimes it depends on what you're doing. So, but there's that brotherhood sort of bonding connection that you get when you work at camp. So I would say all of my best friends I have certainly worked at camp with over the years, and we still stay in touch today, some of them for 18, 20 years. So it's pretty cool to share that experience with somebody.
How did you become involved with on the steering committee of Vital for Colorado, Colorado Springs? I don't know. I know the other folks down in Colorado Springs are very, very involved in that, but I don't know how they've organized a steering committee for that.
Well, I don't know exactly how they organize the steering committee, but Ryan and William actually met with me and talked to me a little bit about what Vital for Colorado was and what they were interested in. And, of course, having that outdoor recreation voice, which is, of course, why I'm on the radio today, is why I think they were interested in having, me on the steering committee, as well as I am involved in the community in several different ways. At the time, I was serving on the Greenway Fund and, of course, was involved with Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance, but also serving with several different people on the Plan COS co-creators and steering committee as well. I think that's pretty much how I ended up on the steering committee for Vital Colorado.
Much of that we're going to talk about in our next segment. You mentioned Plan COS. I think that's fascinating work, as well as the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance. But we'll get to that here in our next segment. So you are a master of foreshadowing, which I appreciate.
Well,
I try my best, but
it's very clear why folks at Vital for Colorado, Colorado Springs would want to I guess, connect with you in terms of being a bona fide outdoor voice, which is such an important part of Colorado. What brought you to want to work on this? I guess, what were your thoughts or motivations?
Vital Colorado?
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's an interesting intersection of the outdoor industry and the energy industry. And I really think that so many people see that there's only one side, there's only one perspective. I have, no matter what I've been involved with, seemed to be that mediating voice of there's something in the middle. And, I begin with, sort of that seek to understand and have compassion for the other perspective before, jumping in and saying something. So I think that's really what drew me to the intersection of the two industries, as well as our community and our state is one of the number one energy producers in the U.S. as well. We just have a lot to benefit from the energy industry and to do it right. The other thing about being involved is, the best way to get done what you want to have done is to actually speak up and say what's on your mind and get involved. Because if you're not involved, someone's making decisions on your behalf, and usually it's not the decisions that you want to be made. So I think for me, just being involved in Vital for Colorado, or being involved in general, is something that's extremely important to me because, it's my future. It's our future. And if I'm not involved in what it looks like, then someone else is going to be making those decisions for me.
That's a great phrase, by the way, that you're believe that you're a mediating voice. That's what we need more of, I think, in this whole state with regard to almost every issue. And it's becoming a scarcer and scarcer resource, I think.
I would agree 100%.
Well, thank you.
And Sean, I think your philosophy speaks to Vital for Colorado overall. We look to be the voice of the rational middle. There's a lot of loud rhetoric on both sides, and we look to bring some sanity to that discussion. And I think that's a nice segue into the Bighorn Energy Leadership Conference.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of which you are a graduate. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience at Bighorn?
Yeah, I have to say, just starting out, Bighorn is one of the best experiences I have had in any conference with such a wide, diverse group of people. And I think that's the main item here is it is a gathering and an intentional gathering of a wide, diverse group of people from all over the state, from different perspectives. We had someone that serves on the energy board for the state of Colorado.
Julie Murphy. Yeah.
We had people that were in the newspaper industry, people that were in the real estate industry, people that were in the actual energy industry, both from the renewable energy side and from, natural gas and coal and oil. Just like I said, a broad, diverse group of people, and we had a great opportunity to learn really about what the energy industry is doing, what it's actually about. Because again, we hear a lot of rhetoric on both sides, whether it be for renewables, for coal, natural gas, oil production, all of the different kinds of energy. But there was also the perspective that was very enlightening for me, was there's an energy mix, and there's, obviously politics and economic forces that you have to consider that your everyday person paying their electric bill doesn't necessarily consider. And we had great conversations that were open and understanding, and that was the immediate intention. It was very intentional of, let's bring this group of people with different perspectives together and set the groundwork where they can have a conversation and really delve into the details of what the energy industry is and isn't, and what people's perspective are. And that was one of the biggest, foundational principles, was everyone's opinion is valid. because we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different experiences, and every experience and every background is valid. So let's start there, and then let's have a conversation about the facts, not just about the rhetoric. I tell you, I learned a lot. I met a lot of great people in that experience, and so Bang for the Buck was, like I said, one of the best conferences I've ever attended in my professional career, for sure.
Well, thanks a lot. We were, Bighorn Energy Leadership Conference has been in Colorado since, I think, 2002. It was started by a whole group of people, folks like Rhett Bridges and Brenda Morrison, and going back to 2002, it's covered topics such as healthcare and education, and many other issues. It was housed for a period of time at Colorado State University, and I'm very gratified actually to hear everything you said about it, because I had exactly the same. I had the same reaction, and this last year we were the sponsor for the Bighorn Energy Leadership Conference, and so I went down there as a sponsor, and we had about 30 people, and as you said, people from all around the state of Colorado. It was nonpartisan, and I don't think you could have guessed what the political party was of anybody that was there, but we had mayors, and we had about 10 people in government. We had a newspaper publisher. We had people that were from the energy industry. And the whole point, it was 8 days over the course of September through December, so 2 days a month, was to provide education and information to public policy discussion, with the hope that with more information and with access to the facts, people will have more reasonable discussions. And that's really what I think the goal is, not to have a specific result, but rather just add information and let intelligence reign. And I felt that so much, and so we're actually going to be the sponsor again this fall, Sean, and we hope we have as strong as a cohort as we did last year.
Yeah, I think, the one thing that you've really touched on there is let intelligence reign, because with all of the facts in front of you, you make better decisions. And when you actually spend some time, I think policymakers and even just everyday people who influence policymakers can make better decisions, can influence things in a more bipartisan way and a more reasonable way than just, this pendulum swing of left to right. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we came across was, in good conversation comes greater understanding and greater decisions, or better decisions.
Well, that's been the history of Bighorn Leadership Conference for many, many years, at least 15 that I can, perhaps 16. And this year and last year it was on energy, but it's been also on the other very, very important issues in Colorado. And we think, Vital for Colorado Board, that's the way to go. So thank you for the stamp of approval. I'll sort of take that.
And Sean, if you would indulge me, for anyone listening who, is considering Bighorn, and you can learn more about Bighorn on Vital for Colorado's website. That's vitalforcolorado.com, VITALFOR, Colorado.com. And
I can spell Colorado, John.
Thank you. What type of insight do you gain there? What was something surprising that you learned that you didn't already know? Something that was revelatory for you?
I think there were a lot of different things, but a couple of the biggest, really easy takeaways for me was during one of the conversations, because of course, everyone is trending, as it were, about renewable energy, and yes, renewable energy is one of the forefronts of our energy production. And one piece that I really took away was that wind energy, of which Colorado produces quite a bit of wind energy, is actually the cheapest form of energy in the entire sort of
the sources
collection
available.
Of ways that we could. There you go. Thank you. Of the sources available, but also that that's the biggest thing is, the more ways we find to create energy, the more energy we actually use. We're just actually, renewable energies are not necessarily the future. They're not necessarily going to handle all of the energy production that we need, not right now, not immediately. But if you look at sort of that sliding curve, that as we produced coal energy in the turn of the century, for the Industrial Revolution, we started to produce more energy and we started to use more energy. And then we started, gas and natural gas and oil production, and we started to produce more energy and we used more energy. It seems like we find more ways to use energy as we create it. And that's what's really interesting there is, yes, renewable energy is a great part of a balanced portfolio of energy production, but it's not going to be the only thing that's going to be able to handle all of our energy production. I mean, wind and solar have their downfalls, just like oil and gas and natural gas production. Each has their pros and cons, and each adds to the energy portfolio that makes for a balanced energy portfolio and a sustainable future, which I think is really what the conversation is. What's the sustainable future? What are we actually talking about? Not just solar is the answer, wind is the answer. And I think a lot of people sort of jump on that bandwagon.
Well, Sean, to your point, I mean, as someone who is active in the outdoor industry, and I mean, your point about renewables is well taken, because natural gas tends to work hand in glove with renewables. You have wind and solar, and as they get to the grid, you have reliable baseload power provided by natural gas. In addition, in the outdoor industry, a lot of the gear and the products that you use come from fossil fuels. All of the nylon and all of the plastics for things like kayaks and equipment and ropes. That's part of that. That's all part of the energy mix, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, exactly. That it comes from the energy production, the oil and gas production. It has a whole lot more to do with our life than really people are willing to admit. And so I think it's the best part is, having that education and really actually delving into what does it really mean and how does it affect you personally, which that was one of the biggest things that we came away with was, the conversation needs to be about how does it affect us personally, because that's how we are actually going to get people to change their minds, is when it affects them personally.
Yeah, and enhancing that understanding is key to that. Mm-hmm. So we've only got a little bit of time left in this segment. So, Peter, I would like you to let everyone know a little bit about Vital for Colorado before we go to break.
Well, thanks, Sean, and I think you know this because at the Big Horn Energy Conference we talked about it, but Vital for Colorado is a Colorado nonprofit. We've been in operation since 2014. We're organized, run a 7 Principles Pledge. We're fortunate enough now to have 87,000 Colorado citizens who have signed the pledge online or in person, about over 1,000 businesses, run by a 15-person board of directors. We do many, many things. We have a research fellow. We publish op-eds. We advocate. And we
have a twice-monthly radio show.
We have a twice-monthly radio show, and we've sponsored now since last year the Big Horn Energy Leadership Conference.
Well, I'll tell you what, coming up in our next segment, more with Sean Holveck. We're going to talk about Plan COS. We're going to talk about the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance. A lot more to come. Stay with us here. Thanks for joining us on Vital for Colorado Radio, part of the Connect and Collaborate Network. Thanks for staying with us here on Vital for Colorado Radio, Connect and Collaborate. Peter Moore is our chairman and CEO. He is also an attorney at Robinson Waters and Odorcio, and he serves as our host. Peter, a pleasure as always.
Thanks a lot, John, and thanks to our guest, Sean Holveck. Sean, you're on the telephone, so we don't have the pleasure of seeing you, but we wanted to talk about your background a little bit, and just as a break, I guess we'll start off with the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance. What is that? And what role have you played in the past?
Yeah, sure. So Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance is actually a collaborative group that includes not only businesses and nonprofits, but actually policymakers and organizations through the city. It is based in the Pikes Peak region, so that would include, Woodland Park, all the way down into Colorado Springs and down to Pueblo and some into Castle Rock and Monument. Pikes Peak is a great big force and great influence in the area as well. And we want the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance is something that actually represents all of those different forces that are involved in the outdoor industry and outdoor recreation as a whole. We want to make Pikes Peak region known as one of the number one places to come for outdoor recreation, not only in the state of Colorado, but actually in the world. So that's what the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance is about.
Actually, I don't recall which publication it was, but just last week or so, I saw something where Colorado Springs was rated as one of the best places in the country to live. I don't know.
The best place to live in the country.
The best place. Was that Fortune magazine or something else?
I can't remember exactly who it was. Sean, do you remember?
I actually, no, I don't remember, which I want to say it was Forbes magazine or USA Today, but
right.
It was definitely, a great surprise. So.
In 2006, I lived in Fort Collins, and Fort Collins earned that distinction. And my favorite thing was the headline of the Fort Collins Coloradoan on the day that was announced said, "We're number one. We are the best place to live in the country." The very next day on the newspaper, it said, "Will this number one ranking ruin our city?" and I thought that's quite the hot and cold take there.
Yeah, definitely.
So about 15 miles to the east of Colorado Springs, Fort Carson has a major Army tank live fire exercise area. Is that why it's the best place?
I
definitely.
100%. So, Sean, you served for a time as the co-executive director of the Alliance, and in your estimation, how has the organization grown? What are some of the successes, and is the Pikes Peak region viewed as one of the preeminent places for outdoor recreation?
Well, I think it depends on who. I'll answer them sort of in a backwards order.
Perfect.
I think it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, it 100% is one of the best places for outdoor recreation. We actually have more miles of trails than any other place in Colorado. If you didn't know that, you should look it up. But, not only do we have just miles of trails to hike and run and ride your mountain bike, but we are the home to America's mountain. What more can you say about that, right? That's world-renowned. And speaking of world-renowned, we're also the home of the U.S. Olympic Committee and USA Training Center, of which most of those Olympic athletes use our outdoor recreation spaces to do some of their training. Apollo Ono was actually one of the number one people to go up the Manitou Incline.
Wow.
The fastest time, in case you didn't know that. But so I think it's one of the best places for outdoor recreation. But like I said, it depends on who you ask. If you're from Boulder, you're probably going to say Boulder is the best place. Or from Fort Collins, you probably say Fort Collins is the best place. But, no matter where you're at in Colorado, you definitely know that there's a great playground in your backyard for outdoor recreation.
Sean, so many people that come to our state from outside the state of Colorado come through ski tour operators and go to one of the very many ski resorts in Colorado, and they think of Colorado as solely being a ski capital of the world. And as I understand it, and I'm a bit of a skier, we probably actually have some of the best snow in the country. But people don't really think of the broadness of outdoor recreation, and you've highlighted it. Trails and streams and mountains and USOC and really communities such as Colorado Springs, where people are dedicated to the outdoor lifestyle. It's a lot more than just a ski resort. And I think that to many people, especially people on the East Coast, where I come from, of course, people think of it in terms of Vail and Aspen and perhaps Keystone. But you're really outlining a much broader picture. I think it's the truer picture, the original picture of Colorado.
Yeah, I agree. It's 12 months all year round of just, you can play at just about anything you want to. And it doesn't just include outdoor recreation. I mean, we have great concerts, we have great music, we have great art, all sorts of other things as well in Colorado. But if you want to come to play, Colorado is a great place to do it.
Well, Sean, earlier in the first segment, you mentioned serving as a river guide at one point, and I defy you to find better river rafting than on the Arkansas River, which am I wrong on that?
I don't think you can.
Yeah?
I don't know. I don't think you can.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, some people would say, maybe not in North America. Now, my girlfriend, who was actually a river guide in Zambezi in South Africa, might disagree. But, of course, it's a different kind of experience out there in Africa. So, anyway.
Well, Sean, we'll just limit our word the best to North America, okay?
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, Zambezi, I guess we can't compete with, but.
I would argue they're probably not in competition with one another for tourist dollars.
No.
At least directly.
Not. Not directly.
Where is I guess South Africa is where Zambezi is?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Well, I think we will let that one go. So, Sean, in terms of talking about your work in the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance, you've done a number of things all around the region. It's important to plan for the future, and Colorado has undergone incredible growth over the last decade, call it, and a lot of people focus on the Front Range, in particular in Denver. But given your involvement in Colorado Springs, I'm guessing that the growth mirrors in some way what's happening in Denver. Is that fair to say?
It's definitely fair to say that the growth mirrors what's happening in Denver. I mean, we have a ton of people moving to Colorado Springs, and I don't want to say anything against Denver. However, I'm obviously biased by living in Colorado Springs, living in the Pikes Peak region. I always say to people, though, why do you want to live in Denver? That's like living on the plains and looking at the mountains. If you want to live in the mountains, or at least next to one, probably, the most well-known one, Pikes Peak, move to Colorado Springs. We have Garden of the Gods and Pikes Peak, and they're right out your back door. Not 40 minutes to the mountains, like 10.
Wow.
So,
that's a pretty good
like
pitch,
I said,
Sean.
I'm a little biased.
Not a bad pitch. I'll give you that. In terms of planning for that growth, you were part of Plan COS, which is the comprehensive plan for Colorado Springs and the surrounding region. Can you talk a little bit about what Plan COS is and some of the things that you do?
Yeah, so Plan COS is actually the comprehensive plan or comprehensive planning process actually for Colorado Springs. And the timeline for how long and how often that plan actually gets updated is sort of debatable depending on who on the steering committee and who in the planning department that you ask. But it is actually a plan for the physical development of the city. And my involvement there was as a volunteer co-creator, which basically means I'm a community member, giving my input and my opinion, as I guess I want to do. But my claim to fame in that particular realm was I stood up several different times and says, this is our opportunity for Colorado Springs really to get a hold on that broad, diverse, again, population that we have, because we have, lots of really great potential in Colorado Springs. And I think we've been waiting for quite some time to realize that potential. And that's what Plan COS really aims to do, is to capitalize on not only our vibrant, neighborhoods and landscape, it's our opportunity for the community as a whole to mirror the beautiful surroundings that we have and to live up to that potential of that great outdoor recreation environment that we have been blessed with as a community, and to build that build that environment that reflects that outdoor, that outdoor place that we live in. And it takes into consideration not only the diverse community, but the diverse geography of Colorado Springs, which is a huge deal. And it's been a great process. But basically what I meant to say was that in that process, what I did is I stood up and I said, hey, this is our opportunity to really go out and talk to the people of our community and make sure that if we're planning for the next 30, 35, 40 years of this community development, let's find out what people actually want. And we can't do that by sitting in the city administration building and just assuming that people are going to come down and tell us what they want. We actually have to go out. You know, we visited some of the festivals around town. There were large public meetings, and they got a great response both in the surveys that they sent out, and they got a great response in some of the just events that they have put on, and people want to see themselves in the community. They want to see themselves in that built environment. They don't just want people in City Hall and people in the administration building saying this is what we're going to do. So it's actually been a really fantastic process. I'm really proud of actually the city government, which a few years ago I certainly would not have been able to say that about Colorado Springs. So
Shonda, just a really broad point of view, I came to Colorado in 1978 to go to law school, and I think there were 2.5 million people living in the state of Colorado at that time. I'm told there are about 5.5 million people in 2018, and there was a fairly famous demographic report by the Brookings Institution about a megacity that they were identifying that they felt as long ago as 2006 actually existed. And I'm not talking about political borders, I'm talking about, but from a demographic point of view, and they're identifying a megacity from Fort Collins down to Colorado Springs. What you're talking about in terms of the comprehensive plan is really trying to focus on the Pikes Peak area or Colorado Springs and distinguish it from other areas, and I guess to compete better. But is the train left the station on that?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Well, it was a run-on sentence, a classic run-on sentence. But what I'm really trying to get to is that many demographers have looked at Colorado and looked at the population growth, and they're not looking at the population growth in Fort Collins and just in Denver and just in Colorado Springs, or I don't think there's much population growth down in Pueblo, but they're rather looking at the entire area. And they're looking at the entire area working together as a region. And
almost like one large metroplex.
As one large metroplex. And they had a name for it. And as I sit here, I don't recall, but I do know from an economic development point of view, at least in many regions in the Denver metro area, we work as more as a regional authority as opposed to, let's say, Denver versus Aurora, and then to the point that I was trying to play devil's advocate with you a little bit, Denver metropolitan area versus the Pikes Peak area, and so there's just an idea that perhaps in 2018 or maybe by 2030, it's really one large metropolitan area as opposed to a bunch of individual areas within the metropolitan area.
Well, and I have
so, like, what do you think about that?
For that, so when I was the marketing director at Cheyenne Mountain Resort, my boss and I actually made a prediction that the Denver area to Colorado Springs area would be much like the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah,
and that there would be that giant metroplex. However, there's a little bit more distance between Denver and Colorado Springs. And the one thing I always like to point out, again, being biased by living in Colorado Springs, is that keep in mind Colorado Springs city limits would engulf the Denver metroplex. But
if you laid them on top of each other?
Yeah, if you laid them on top of each other. Remember, Colorado Springs city limits is close to 20 square miles.
Hmm.
So, or sorry, not 20 square miles, 200 square miles, which it's a really large geographic area just as one city. But I think we are definitely branching out into that regional sort of perspective because obviously along the Front Range and throughout Colorado, whether you look at transportation or economy, whatever, we all depend on each other. And I think that's one thing that we can say is, you know, even in the outdoor industry, we can do a lot as one, but we can do anything when we work together. So I like the idea of that sort of, you know, Front Range super metro. If we could connect the Denver, you know, transportation and light rail from all the way from Denver to Colorado Springs, I think that would be awesome because, you know, Denver has a lot of things that Colorado Springs doesn't have, and Colorado Springs, as it was its nature and its foundation to be a resort city, it has a lot of things that Denver doesn't have. I think, you know, the biggest thing, like I said, even though I'm sort of biased for Colorado Springs, is that, you know, we all work together and we all love Colorado. We all love the outdoor recreation industry or just being involved in outdoor recreation. And I think it would be fantastic if, you know, Colorado continues that growth and is partnered in that way to reflect in its economy and have that sort of social equity amongst people that, you know, all of the areas in Colorado thrive because we make decisions based on everyone, not just on one community. So that's kind of my thoughts.
But on the other hand, the Pikes Peak area really has some very, very distinct attributes, some very distinct communities. And I'm thinking about the military community, which I think is very important for Colorado Springs. That is distinct, I think, to Colorado Springs. I know Denver has also a strong military, but nothing like Colorado Springs.
No, certainly not.
No. I mean, we are home to the Air Force Academy and home to 5 other different military installations. So it definitely has a big influence on our community, which I think is fantastic.
We got Schreiber and Carson.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the themes that has run through this show that I feel the need to highlight, and I think it'll bridge into perhaps our last topic area here, is we've talked about collaboration. We've talked about coming together on any number of issues, whether it was Bighorn, whether it's, you know, outdoors, whether it's planning, putting a comprehensive plan together, whether that is for Colorado Springs and the region specifically, or, you know, how do we ensure that we're growing appropriately between Denver, Colorado Springs, and even expanding north towards Fort Collins. Sean, one of the things that we had talked about when we were off mic was, and that you mentioned early in this show, was there's sometimes the view of an adversarial relationship between the outdoor industry and energy development, but that is not your view. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, and we talked about this a little before the show, was Luis Benitez, who is the outdoor recreation director for Colorado, has asked the question at a numerous amounts of times is, can the outdoor industry save the world? And I think the way that I look at it is the ethos of outdoor recreation, of that being compassionate towards the other, one, by starting and understanding yourself, that sort of, there's a perspective of leave it better than you found it and leave no trace, all of those different pieces. But there's a collaboration in there that really talks about our ethos as people in the outdoors and working together to preserve our history, preserve the land. And what's interesting, sort of, as I was reading the news today, and I wanted to bring up, of course, thank you for helping me with that, John, is LWCF, which is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is in its 53rd year of funding. It's something extremely important in the outdoor industry right now. It's one of the hot topics. in Congress, as well as whether they are going to continue to fund conservation and our lands. I think it would be remiss if I didn't say basically they're funding the legacy of the American West when we talk about what the Land and Water Conservation Fund has done. But the unique fact about that in the intersection, especially in this conversation, is that the Land and Water Conservation Fund is actually funded by the oil and natural gas, or much of it is funded by the oil and natural gas industry.
Traditionally, offshore leases, essentially, production that happens in deep water, for instance, in the Gulf of Mexico.
That's correct. And so there is that collaboration there of the oil and natural gas and energy industry and the outdoor recreation industry. We're both, I think, vying for somewhat the same amount of lands, but even if a energy production company holds a lease for a national forest or for a particular part of land, there's, I think, a way to operate that land in a way that can please both sides. You can, mine the resources from that land that help us create a healthy energy economy and help our economy be sustainable and be healthy, as well as serve the needs of our outdoor recreation needs and help, that compassion and that mindset and that perspective of the American West and of our legacy continue to collaborate together to create an even stronger future.
Well, if you
because
think
the idea here is, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you think back to Teddy Roosevelt and his multiple use doctrine, where federal lands would be preserved so that people had access for things like outdoor recreation, for cattle ranching, for natural resource development. Those things can coexist in harmony and don't necessarily need to be in opposition from one another. And to your point, in terms of making the world a better place, U.S. carbon emissions continue to fall, largely thanks to switching from coal to natural gas, which improves our air quality, which is great for everyone, particularly if you're doing activities in the outdoors. We've only got about a minute left, Sean. Would you care to react to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think on both sides, again, there's a lot of rhetoric about, one is bad, the other is bad. I think the biggest thing here is that we need to find a way to collaborate and actually find the equity that was meant by that agreement, by that sort of vision from Teddy Roosevelt, is that there is an opportunity to have multi-use. It's not necessarily happening at the moment, but I think if we talk to each other and we actually work together and seek to understand each other, we can make that happen and have that sustainable future that we're looking for. So.
Well, Sean, it just as a thought, I was looking at the shift principles that you gave to us as part of one of your organizations, and in order to be a good steward of the land, in order to have preservation of the land and the culture of the West and access to the resources, all of those require economic stability.
So
that's correct.
Sean,
yeah,
very quickly, where can people find you? Where can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
If people want to reach out to me, they can send me an email at Sean, SEAN, at HolveckDesigns.com. That's HOLV as in Victor, E as in Edward, C as in cat, and K as in kitten, designs.com.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. You can find this episode on vitalforcolorado.com. Go to the Learn tab, videos and podcasts. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, John.